the summits of Lake Sherpa, and this series is called, of course, the Cinematic Summit of Lucy Walker. This film, I saw it in 2013. It struck me anew in watching it for our conversation. So meaningful and so powerful. Lucy, talk to us about the origins of it. I know that you came to it and you found out about Kevin's accident the summer after it happened, in the summer of 2010. But talk to us about it as a documentarian, what you saw, what some of the challenges were, even of getting the story going as you were putting together the backstory of it.
Yeah, it's a strange thing that I didn't meet Kevin before the accident. I met him afterwards, and so all that footage was gathered from 232 different places to stitch together that whole. It looks like there was a film crew following him around. Well, I don't know. I think it might look like that, and it wasn't. It was just a whole bunch of fragments that all kinds of people had. I think there were like one point it was like 3 people called Thurston all had clips. It was like that, you know, in different countries and around the world, and it was just incredible to kind of like an archaeological dig or a jigsaw piece puzzle. We had to kind of like find all the jigsaw pieces around the world, and but what I'm trying to say is I wasn't there. I didn't meet him till he crashed, and I was interested because he crashed. And how that happened was, I had in 2010, right, gone to this camp thing for like action sports athletes to inspire them. But I was actually going because I was interested in doing a film about like deep, underwater breath hold people. Like they just did Deepest Breath last year about that. But I was kind of interested in these other athletes because I thought that could make a good movie. When I went there, Kevin was sort of visiting, but he wasn't really participating because of his injury. And he was there with his brother. And to start with, I thought, oh, poor guy, he's crashed. I hope he does well with his recovery. But I started to chat to him and his brother more, and he started to say he wants to get back to the sport. I couldn't kind of understand. He was here with all these top athletes in the whole world, and no one was telling him he couldn't do it. And so I was really curious. I was like, wow, you watch Hollywood movies about really implausible comebacks. It seems like it's too implausible. But is it possible? Because he showed me this video he had of how impaired he'd been before, and he'd been coming along such a long way. But then I thought it can't be possible, but I could see that he wasn't accepting it. Anyway, I just became completely gripped by this idea of what was going to happen and wanting to find out, and being very moved by him and his brother, and learning about him having a brother with Down syndrome as well. And so I just sort of started to think, oh, maybe it's not something to give to another filmmaker that could make him a kind of sweet, yay, get well Kevin kind of video. And instead, I started to think, well, actually, this is a more interesting sports story than the one I come here to make, or to kind of meet people to think about making. And I just became slowly kind of convinced that I could make a film out of his story because I wanted to find out where it was going. And I had this hunch that there'd be enough material to stitch it all together so that it could be kind of play as a movie. Because I always think if there's nothing going to be good on the screen, I should just go and write a magazine article or something like that. But for me to want to make a movie, it has to be like enough, amazing audio visual material to tell a story with. And he and his brother said that there had been somebody filming the moment of the crash. And that really got me thinking. I thought, wow, if it happened to have been filmed, there must be so many other moments. This is probably a little bit more obvious now than it was back in 2010. But I was really thinking back in 2010, like, wow, all these video that's been captured of him, if I could gather it together, I could tell that story, and it would be, documentary. And so that's sort of how it all began.
There's a few story beats there I want to follow up on in a minute, but one is that both the notion of the everything being filmed, but the other thing is that something that Simon Pearce, Kevin's father, mentioned at the Thanksgiving scene, is talking about the culture, and you talked about this yourself, the culture of extremity that goes on, and sort of the addictive nature of it, and the bigger and much moreness that kind of happens. higher walls, more dangerous half pipes, all of these things. And as you're putting the film together as a documentarian, was that sort of there as well? Because that was certainly on the ascent in terms of dirt bike sports and extreme sports and all of that. Was that obviously a part of it as well, to kind of really kind of take a chance to look at all of this culture of extremity?
Yeah, I hadn't even perhaps thought about it as a critique of the culture so much as I had become aware. I remember one time catching a kind of display, a kind of half-pipe display situation, and just my eyeballs really getting grabbed by it. And I thought, wow, this is so mesmerizing and eye-popping and impressive. I can't move my eyeballs away from it. Like, I don't know if anyone else is watching Olympic gymnastics right now. I was in a gymnastics series. I really loved that, watching that, and it's incredible. And it was the same thing with snowboarding. Like, I love watching it, but I found myself as a personal question more than a kind of industry takedown, thinking, like, what's my relationship with the danger that the people are running, and how much risk is too much risk? And these were just really alive questions for me. And I think I probably really like things that are alive questions and stories that help me process those kind of questions I have, these kind of internal contradictions or something. I kind of think that they're quite interesting. My first movie, which is showing tomorrow, is about Amish kids sort of being torn between two worlds because they are grown up, they're brought up strictly Amish, but at the age of 16, suddenly on the 16th birthday, they're set free from all the rules. So they can wear jeans and cut their hair and listen to music and play sports and go to parties and take crystal meth, and they do, and things like that. And suddenly they can experiment with the outside world, but they have this, it's part of their process of trying to make a decision about which life do they lead. And if they choose to join the church as an adult, they have to do that. And the film's very much about like that, those trying to sort of find one's way. And so those kinds of questions, I think, are really dramatic kind of questions I have about how to live, and and I like these stories that kind of, I guess, dramatically explore that. So, yeah, I think it is this moment, and we still have it, right? And I think that's also true of Mountain Queen and Blindsight, Blindsight's my first Everest movie, which is about blind people actually climbing the mountain next to Everest on the Tibet side, which coincidentally is called Lakpa, which is funny because, of course, Mountain Queen's about a Lakpa. But we were climbing this mountain called Lakpa-ri, which is 23,000 feet next to Everest on the north side, and it was really dangerous. And so again, that movie is about like, how dangerous is it? Too dangerous, and Mountain Queen is not without its risk as well, because Lakpa is a very serious mountain climber. So I think these questions are very dramatic, relevant ones to that work on screen, I suppose, or I must be fascinated, I suppose.
Just want to note that Mountain Queen is streaming on Netflix. It's just started this past week on Wednesday. It's also phenomenal, so seek it out there as well.
I think I told them that already. I'm very excited about it, so forgive us.
And then to kind of turn the binoculars around a little bit, Lucy, because the one of the aspects of this film that's so dynamic is obviously Kevin's personality. He is such a dynamic person, so engaging, as so many of those guys are, men and women. And there's sort of this, we kind of get addicted to their addiction, that they're really, their energy is really phenomenal and amazing to watch. But when you come to the story, 6 months or so after Kevin's accident, he was not that guy yet. It kind of took a while for him to get there. As you were kind of piecing the story together as a documentarian, what was that like for you to see the person he was prior to the accident, and then sort of in that year or so after the accident, and becoming, again, a different kind of person?
Yeah, good question. I learned so much about traumatic brain injuries and how unbelievable the recovery can be, and how people can really change when they have one. Something that was really fascinating making this film was actually the Shaun White of it all. Because, you know, when Kevin had crashed, I met him after the crash, no one mentioned Shaun White. It was like all that rivalry became such a, like, dead and buried, don't even think about it, Shaun won, it's so tragic what happened to Kevin. No one ever sort of talked about it. And it was really strange, like an archaeological dig, when I started to sort of think about like what had been driving Kevin and started to ask people like, well, what's driving him, and suddenly get this hint that was Shaun involved, and just kind of scraped away the surface of this and started to find this footage, and then sort of looked for more footage, and then was like searching for any footage of the two of them together, and I was like, what is going on? So that whole thing, and I found more and more and more footage. And the very latest things I found was the interview piece with Kevin, where he says like, we're not really friends at this point, and things like that. And then I heard about their fire, extinguisher episode and things like this, and they're leaving the 30,000 yen on outside his house, and but that rivalry, it's so interesting when you make a documentary, and I love these kind of narrative, character-driven, longitudinal films where you kind of do this giant jigsaw puzzle. It is kind of a party. Giant jigsaw puzzles, which is like my very good time, so maybe that's why I call it a party. But it is like I really enjoy putting together all these different pieces and telling a story like that, and editing it so it feels like a real movie, because I feel like there's no greater machine than documentary filmmaking to actually glimpse how the forces on a life, shape a life, and how lives unfold and change direction. And you see years of people's lives compressed into, a movie. And like the 7 Up series, which I grew up on, 7 Up and 14 Up, and that incredible British series, I really grew up on that. Or Dreams was a film that I used to watch repeatedly. Like, how do you do this? How do you do this? Which is an amazing film from the early 90s, mid 90s. Is that right? About I think it's mid 90s, right? And it follows 2 very promising young basketball stars over a few years, very skillfully made by Steve James. And so that whole way that you see these forces shape and the Kevin Shaun thing was just a story that was like, I felt like it was so funny that it wasn't all visible from the point in time I started at, and then it became so obviously such a powerful driver of the story. It was just really interesting how it all worked like that.
Yeah. In addition to Shaun sort of saying that it kind of haunts him, it could be that kind of thing could happen to him. There's also sort of that unspoken thing like you're speaking of, that drive to one up each other, to win their competitions, with each of them kind of upping the game a little bit. It's sort of what leads to
yeah, absolutely. Such a rivalry.
Yeah.
Such a rivalry. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about you mentioned them earlier, and so the family, because obviously Kevin's family is amazing, and the access to them, and the way that they sort of become emotional collaborators in a lot of ways with you, because they are not just sort of these ancillary figures, just supportive figures. They're really, their arc and their journey is as much a part of this film, right?
Absolutely, as they are Mountain Queen actually. But I really love that dinner table scene, when they're all around the Thanksgiving. I like both of them. 2 Thanksgiving scenes in there. But the first Thanksgiving scene where David says, I don't want you to die, and I love that scene. And it's such a kind of great example of when you're making a documentary. It was just me doing sound, one amazing director of photography, Nick Higgins, and me doing the sound, just the 2 of us, and showing up at their house, because I had a hunch that Kevin wanted to go home and wanted to talk about it at Thanksgiving, and I thought that's going to be an interesting conversation. So I made sure and got there first and got set up, and then we filmed that with just one camera. It's just very difficult editing it together because there's nothing else. There's no other second camera to cut to, and there's no take 2s because it's not a movie, right? So there was a lot of editing to kind of stitch it all together, so it didn't feel like it bumped you out. But I thought that was such a incredible, life doesn't throw you scenes like that feel like they could be a really good scripted movie, right? and because it was just such an interesting discussion that the family was having. And I love, something else I love about that scene is that I kind of like withheld that his dad was Simon Pearce, is like, you know, the best glass blower in the world. And and so Kevin says, oh yeah, you know, like glass blowing, and you're like, what did he say? And then you cut to the glass blowing factory. I'm like, that was fun. That was a fun edit. So I kind of think, yeah, I love just, I guess I love putting these stories together in ways that kind of keep a few tricks up your sleeve and keep the story, well, I don't know, hopefully keep the story, you know, keep the story interesting and going new places and unfolding in new and, you know, in new ways that you didn't see coming. But I didn't know where it was going. I look back and it's like, you know, we made this really fast. We didn't have a lot of money, and somehow I had like real confidence that we'd get there. And yeah, and I met him in 2010, and we finished at the end of 2012. So it premiered like January 2013 at Sundance. So it was like a 2-year process, and kind of a lot happened, and the story really landed. And yes, he's gotten married and had 2 kids since then, as you saw, and he's doing so great. But actually, this story all has landed in those 2 years, and so it's quite interesting. Yeah, it's just it kind of made those were that was the period to follow, and I don't know how I knew to stop it then, but it didn't. Nothing else really happened after that. I mean, that was where we, you know, that was his real process of realizing that he wanted a different thing. And the last thing, sorry to ramble, but it's kind of amazing is we set up this Love Your Brain campaign for brain injury awareness and yeah, helping people with traumatic brain injuries, which was kind of a platform for Kevin to do because he wasn't going to be able to compete. And my producer partner and I kind of set it up and gave it to Kevin and his family, called it Love Your Brain, inspired by the scene. And then Kevin and his brother took it over, and it's really running to this day, and they do incredible stuff. I just get the newsletter, and they really have done it. They have camps every year for brain injury survivors and their carers, and it's just loads of free yoga and meditation for people with brain injuries in this country, and all kinds of good stuff. So that all happened really quickly, and so yeah, it was quite. I remember working really intensely on it, but it was funny how compressed it was. Looking back, I'm like, whoa, that was a lot happened in those.
The thing is that it's sort of, you can sort of see it happening kind of obviously in real time as you're filming. You're seeing his progression. You're seeing him kind of grow. I just want to note that after the premiere at Sundance, it also won an Emmy Award. It won 2 South by Southwest Awards. It won a Cinematic Eye Honors Award. So it was such a terrific film in 2013 as it is now. To wrap up, Lucy, you commented once about the film being that you thought it was going to be sort of one thing, then it became another. It's going to be this kind of feel-good, Rocky-like story, and then it's not this 2-act thing. There's much more, and it sort of became, and the phrase just really rings with me, a fable about growing up, which I think is really a beautiful phrase, and you really do see it, and in that sort of accelerated time of 2010 to 2012 or so of your filming. Talk to us a little bit about that, how you really sort of see Kevin grow up in a different kind of way, or kind of realize and he says it in the film, he had these roots, oh, what if I have to come back from something, and then he actually has to come back from something. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I guess I really, and you know, maybe this is me really imposing this story on it, but I really saw somebody having a dream that they were pursuing so passionately that was just really within their grasp. And then, you know, fortune working out as it did, him having to play the hand he was dealt instead of the hand that he wanted to play. And I think that's such a strong and difficult experience that happens to sort of many people in completely different ways in life. And in a way, in my own life, I think I've seen ways that that's played out in my own life. And so I kind of was very tuned into that story, and I think it probably was the right sort of structure, and probably the right way to think about his story. I think that probably is sort of a reasonable way of understanding what he was going through in those years, right? Because there's always different impressions, and one is always imposing one's own story on some level, but I think that's a reasonable imposition, or observation or something. So yeah, that's what I saw as like, it's a real like, what do you do when you don't get plan A? And that scene with Trevor was so, one is always hoping as a documentary filmmaker for scenes that dramatize what's happening in ways that you could put it on the screen and then the audience can really just watch it and understand it for themselves, rather than me, I don't want to tell you what to think. I want to kind of myself watch and make sense of things for myself, and I always want to provide that for the audience as well. And so that visit with the other kid, I thought did that really well. And but sometimes I'm a little sneaky directing. Should I share this? So, for example, with the dinner scene, I said, don't talk to your family about what you want to do until you get there, and the camera's rolling. And then I said, now you can talk about anything you want. And I knew it was going to explode. And then also with that scene with Trevor, I knew that Kevin was giving a talk right by Trevor's house, and I knew what had happened to Trevor. And so I said, Kevin, when you give that talk in Michigan, that's right by Trevor's house. Have you thought about giving him a visit? And so I think stuff like that is, as with Mountain Queen, I'm in Kathmandu with Lakpa, and I'm like, that place you met your husband? Have you ever thought about taking your daughter there and talking to her about the night you met? Because I think you are trying to kind of bring to life these events, right, and dramatizations. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I suggest a lot of things that don't work out or aren't very interesting, even if you do sort of get around to them. But I don't feel bad for kind of, I guess, opening the door to things happening that might kind of illuminate the story or let us glimpse what's going on in a more exterior way than just sort of an interview. So, but I didn't know what was going to happen to Kevin in general. I didn't know what was going to happen when we visited, Trevor. That moment when you can see Kevin saying, "Oh my God," when he can't find his elbow or whatever. It's just, it's such powerful stuff. And again, as a kind of documentary filmmaker, I think what I love is this opportunity to actually kind of see how life works, and just to be this witness and observe in these incredibly, amazing people that are generous enough to let you in on what they're going through. This incredible, his generosity and the family generosity in sharing that, so that we can all go on this journey with them. I think that my movies are only as good as the people in them have this like outrageous, I think it's generosity, to share their vulnerable experience, knowing that the pain that they've gone through might help other people. They might, so I think that's, I really want to, that would be my closing thought, is like, wow, that Pearce family, and wow, Kevin, right? So.
Yeah, and towards the end, what I love about that is you see him in a way kind of come to the next stage that he's going to be in life, which is, to be a motivational speaker, to help people to work with other traumatic brain injury patients and everything. Yeah.
Which he totally has done. It's just, amazing.
So amazing. Well, the film is amazing and powerful and so memorable. I just want to remind everybody that Mountain Queen, The Summits of La Creshupa, is streaming on Netflix, and tomorrow, Blind Sight and Devil's Playground, Monday, a short film showcase, and Bring Your Own Brigade on Thursday. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucy Walker, and the film is The Crash Reel.
Thank you so much.